agreement provides duty-free and quota-free access to our respective markets. It took a little bit of time for both the EU and Ghana to agree on the implementation arrangements. As I speak now, from the 1st of January, the provisions of the agreement require both countries to start implementing the provisions of the agreement. And in trade agreements, there is what is called tariff liberalization schedule. That is the schedule that determines the time that both countries would open up their markets for preferential trade agreement between the two countries. So beginning from 1st of January, both the EU and Ghana will start implementing the terms of the Interim Economic Partnership Agreement. With respect to the UK, Mr. Chairman, you will recall that the UK had been part of the EU, and therefore the trading relationship between Ghana and the UK was defined within the context of the Economic Partnership Agreement between the EU and Ghana, which I've just referred to. But with the exit of the UK from the European Union, it became necessary for Ghana to negotiate a new agreement with the UK. Now, under normal circumstances, this ought not to have been a contentious one regarding the long-standing bonds of friendship between Ghana and the UK. So we started technical consultations in March 2018, hoping that we could come to an agreement before the exit date of the UK from the EU. Regrettably, there were major differences of opinion between Ghana and the UK in respect of the content of that agreement. The position of the UK had been that since we already had an agreement with the EU, of which UK was part, in their own view, if they were exiting from the EU, then the principle of continuity ought to be invoked, meaning that the provisions that were underpinning the agreement between Ghana and the EU should now be applied between Ghana and the UK. And we had a major disagreement with that position of the UK. And then we recognize that having exited from the EU, the UK had a major challenge to negotiate individual trade agreements with every country that the EU had a relationship with. So we understood the challenge that they had, and that was why they were using this continuity principle. But the reason why we disagreed with the principle of continuity was that the EU-Ghana agreement that I've just referred to, it's inconsistent with the provisions of the customs union of ECOWAS. Technically speaking, we are now a member of the ECOWAS customs union. And if you're a member of the ECOWAS customs union, you have no flexibility to negotiate outside the customs union without the concurrence of the customs union. And the same thing that applied to the UK. When the UK was part of the EU, they had absolutely no authority to negotiate outside the EU. So our position was that if we now have to sign an agreement with the UK, then it has to be consistent with the provisions of the ECOWAS Customs Union. And we went back and forth for almost a year at the level of technical consultations until December 2020, when the UK was just about to exit. And we wanted to avoid a trade disruption between Ghana and the UK. So I decided to escalate the discussions to a higher political level to see whether there could be a breakthrough. Because we were proposing that we use an original text of a regional economic partnership agreement that had been signed between the EU and then ECOWAS. We felt that that regional text should be the basis for the text of the agreement between Ghana and the UK, so that it will be consistent with the requirements of our customs union. So when I escalated the negotiations to the level of my counterpart, the Right Honorable Liz Strauss, in December, the last week of December, she graciously agreed that as an exception to their principle of continuity, they would accept our position to use the text of the Regional Economic Partnership Agreement as the basis for the new bilateral Ghana-UK agreement, so that once it enters into force, then it will not be difficult to convince ECOWAS to also adopt that. So basically, where we are now, the President has given executive approval for the agreement. We've forwarded the agreement to Parliament. The UK government has signaled that on the 2nd of March, both countries will sign the new Ghana-UK agreement, and then it will enter into force hopefully on the 5th of March. So that's where we are.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate that. The bane of every finance minister in Ghana, from independence to yesterday, is the problem of our imports outweighing exports, particularly rice and sugar. And rice in the sense that we have comparative advantage to produce it. We are spending close to $1 billion US in importing just these two commodities annually. That affects our balance of payments. That affects the exchange rate and the stability of the city. As a minister responsible for the economy, what plans do you have to expand our exports and to reduce our imports? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman, I did not intend to create a problem for our President. I thought I heard the Honorable Minority Leader talk about me being responsible for the economy. If I heard you right, then...
responsible for trade and industry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I didn't say finance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, you are absolutely right. There's a major problem that has confronted this country for decades, for over a century, in terms of the number of products that we import into our country which could be produced locally. And as the Honourable Member of Parliament, the Minority Leader indicated, currently between these three commodities, sugar, rice, and then poultry, we're almost close to $1 billion of imports for absolutely no reason, because we have the local capacity to be able to do import substitution and produce these commodities. But this underpins the decision of His Excellency the President for Ghana to launch a comprehensive program for industrial transformation, which my ministry has been leading. And basically, this transformation program is anchored on two parallel tracks. First, to ensure that we produce to export, and secondly, also that we produce for the purposes of import substitution. And so we have very comprehensive interventions that we have put in place, and I'm sure as we go on in this exercise, these matters will come up. Very comprehensive transformational interventions that is building the capacity of local businesses to be able to import substitute and also even produce these products for export. So we are already on the right path, and that's the basis for our industrial transformation agenda. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chairman, thank you. Honorable nominee responsible for trade and industry, you are largely responsible for the implementation of the present flagship initiative, 1D, 1F, one district, one factory, which for all intents and purposes is intended to provide opportunities for many people and to lead our effort in industrialization. Can you provide us how many so far and give a regional background in the Upper East, Upper West through the 16 regions? How many 1D, 1F have you been able to initiate and where, and the status of it? Thank you, Chair.
Chairman, Mr. Chairman, again, I think it is appropriate for me to indicate that the One District, One Factory initiative, which has been led by the Ministry of Trade and Industry, is one of the most revolutionary interventions to have been introduced in our country since independence. It goes to the core of bringing industry and development to the doorstep of the ordinary people. And that is why we've pursued with aggression this whole program of One District, One Factory. Currently, we have 232 1D1F projects that are at various stages of implementation. And contrary to some of the comments that have been made, that the 1D1F is an attempt just to brush up existing companies. Indeed, whilst the program implementation framework allows for existing companies to be 1D1F companies, but if you look at the statistics, out of the 232 companies, only 64 are existing companies and 168 are new companies. Now, the breakdown is as follows. Projects currently operating as 1D1F is 76. Projects under construction is 107. And then projects ready to commence construction within the first half of this year is 49. And so far, out of the 232 projects, 56% are agro-processing projects, 22% general manufacturing, 5% meat processing, primary agriculture is 4%, and there are other industrial enterprises which constitute 13%. Through the intervention of the 1D1F, 139,331 direct and indirect jobs have been created by the 76 companies that are already operational. 285,915 additional direct and indirect jobs are projected from the projects that are under construction. Mr. Chairman, through this initiative, we've been able to mobilize 2.3 billion Ghana cedis from local financial institutions. Government has provided interest subsidy payment to support 213 interest subsidy support of 213 million Ghana cedis. This is meant to de-risk the project for the banks because the interest subsidy then makes it easier for them to become more profitable. And in addition to that, 603 million import duty exemptions have been granted to 37 1D1F companies having come through this honorable house. Mr. Chairman, unfortunately, I do not have with me the regional breakdown, but this is the status.
So can you speak with certainty that as revolutionary as you describe it, it's in the Upper West region as in the Upper East region? Can you speak with certainty? There are 1D initiatives in Bolga, Navrungu, Zebula, or any part of it, or in the Upper West region, whether Lambuse or Tumu or where in these two regions, I want to know whether the revolution have gotten there. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Chairman, as I indicated, I do not have the regional breakdown with me, and I think before this honorable house, it is appropriate that I give accurate information.
Chairman, we know that the last time he came to Parliament, the Upper West region did not benefit from it. There was one in the Upper East region, and our follow-up, there's no significant development in it. But let me now take you to another area. After you've done well with the president, which was initiated by late President Mills, this Free African Continental Trade Agreement, which is headquartered now in Ghana. Now, trade liberalization, particularly, I'm going to use Nigeria as a case study. Dangote cement is in Ghana. Simaf, Moroccan, is in Ghana. Many Ghanaian entrepreneurs cannot break through the Nigerian market. And you are aware that there is what the Nigerians call the prohibited list of imports from Ghana into Nigeria. I know in the last couple of months you've been trying to manage the problems associated with the GIPC limitation, even for retail trading within our country by foreigners and in particular Nigerians, which almost led to some diplomatic problems between our two countries. Now, Jata Cement is local. There's a local Ghanaian who is doing well to produce cement. What will you do to improve the competitiveness of the Ghanaian entrepreneur to match with their counterparts in Nigeria and beyond? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I indicated earlier on that to a large extent, under the leadership of our President and also under my own leadership leading the ministry, we've been ahead of the coming into force of the AfCFTA. Because if time permits, and I go through some of the industrial initiatives that we've been implementing in the last 4 years, the question that has been put by the Honorable Minority Leader is answered by the decision that we have taken ahead of the AfTA to introduce initiatives that will enhance the local capacity of our businesses, preparing them to be able to export not only to ECOWAS, but to the wider African market. I don't want to just dwell on the 1D1F, but the 1D1F is a major intervention that would enable our companies to be able to produce to meet the requirements of AfTA. But beyond that, as I said, there are other interventions which are already in place. But in addition to that, Mr. Chairman, specifically following the start of trading, we've already initiated a national program of action to identify different categories of Ghanaian companies that we would support to take advantage of AfTA. One category are companies that are already exporting to Africa. So these are low-hanging fruits. So we are distilling information on these existing companies. All we are doing is to make sure that we enhance their capacity to be able to sell more. Then there's another category of companies that are exporting currently, but not necessarily to Africa. So it means that they have the capacity to export. And so we are also helping them to identify specific products that they can now produce to export to the African market. And obviously also new companies that we can incubate specifically to target AfTA. So there's a lot that is already going on. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chairman, that's appreciated. I'll take the nominee to the manufacturing sector of Ghana. What's its contribution to our GDP? But I want you to respond relative to a lopsided industrial development in Ghana. Beyond Tema and Accra and little portions of Ashanti region. And Chairman, we all can use it as an example. When it's 4:30 p.m. to 5:30, you see in the industrial area, maybe North Kaneshi, large army of young people come out, heading home. It means they've had a job to do and they have earned an income. Beyond Accra and Tema, I don't see that anywhere in the Brown Hafu region. I don't see that in the northern region, in the upper east, upper west region. And my faith is that this is how we can address the unemployment challenge. And probably you must have some thinking on light manufacturing, the light manufacturing industry. What plans do you have for that to address the growing unemployment in our country? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, even at the risk of sounding repetitive, I think it is important that I go back to the point that I made earlier on, that the government has already embarked on this very comprehensive program for industrial transformation. And I agree completely with the Honorable Member that currently, beyond Accra and Kumasi, there is little evidence of significant industrial activity. But that's the whole point about having a program that decentralizes industrial development, about the 1D1F in particular. But it also goes beyond the 1D1F, recognizing that the 1D1F typically may be medium-sized companies. We have also embarked on a program to support micro and small enterprises. And so as I speak now, we have established 67 business resource centers that will cover all the districts in Ghana. And these business resource centers, 37 of them are already operational, and the other 30 will be completed again by the middle of this year. Now, these BRCs, or business resource centers, are one-stop enterprise support centers that are supposed to deliver business development services to micro, small enterprises throughout the country, so that what the honorable member is referring to will become a thing of the past. So if you are in maybe Tamale South, it's developed to the extent that we cannot necessarily put them in this category. But if you are in Bunkugu or any other part of the northern regions, or in Ashanti, or in the western north, any part of the country, now you have the opportunity to go to a business resource center that will provide you with a full complement of services to enable you either start your business or enhance the capacity of your current enterprise activity. So basically, what you're asking for, honorable member, is exactly what these business resource centers are doing.
Chairman, I want to just, for now, integrated customs management system, and you know, at the policy and institutional level, I support you that trade facilitation is not a function of finance or the Ministry of Finance. I think that under our WTO obligations and protocols, you should be leading matters of trade facilitation. The transition from GCNet to UNIPAS is likely to occasion a judgment debt for the country, because GCNet was really providing those services, probably ably. I've had some discrepancies in terms of numbers. How is revenue faring, and how the revenue fare under the GCNet? You want to explain the circumstance that led to the termination of the GCNet agreement, which is likely to visit a judgment debt on our country? I thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, before I proceed to answer, I respectfully have a different opinion from the minority leader about the fact that what we've put in place as a new trade facilitation system is going to incur judgment debt. But let me give a little bit of a background to this. Without doubt, trade is the engine of growth for every country. And this explains why the most powerful economies of the world also happen to be the most powerful trading nations. So there is no debate about the value of trade. Now, when you talk about trade, then it's the facilitation of trade, the systems and processes that you put down in your country that allows trade to move on easily, freely, both import and export. Now, if you look at our trade facilitation space over the last decades, 4 decades, since import licenses were abolished in the 70s, this space of import-export has been characterized by a multiplicity of service providers, which I describe as a spaghetti bowl of service providers. You have so many companies that are providing different types of services, very often not fully integrated and coordinated with each other. This, regrettably, has been one of the major reasons why there have been leakages in our trade facilitation landscape, and then by extension also our revenue mobilization space. And when we took office in 2017. And remember, I think we are in the same club, trade ministers. I have been there before, and so I know about GCNet, and I knew about the destination inspection companies. But I was surprised to find out when I took office in 2017 that this multiplicity of service providers still existed. And in addition to GCNet and West Blue, you had 4 others, bringing the total to 6 service providers who were providing different types of services. Now, the fact that these service providers are using digital platforms that do not speak to each other, obviously it cannot generate maximum operational efficiency. And so I took a bold decision that we needed, for once in our country, to put in place a comprehensive, fully integrated, end-to-end trade facilitation system that will do a number of things. Provide operational efficiency for imports and for exports. Secondly, to enhance revenue mobilization. Also, deepen our security arrangements for both exports and then imports. And so we went through the public procurement process, and then we selected a company that is a local company, but that is working together with the Korean Customs Service to deploy a new technology called Unipass. And in spite of all the noise and the negative comments about this bold effort that we took, the statistics now is clear about the value of this new intervention. And with your indulgence, I'll just give you just a few numbers. Now, the Unipass, or the Ghana rendition of it, which is called ICONS, Integrated Customs Management System. Now, this ICONS was fully deployed in June 2020, when a lot of noise was being made. Now, in July, there's after.
You mean controversy? You mean controversies are surrounding the change in initiative?
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
You were saying noise. I thought you wanted controversy to better fit the situation.
Oh, okay. Yes, controversy surrounding the production of the Unipass.
Chairman, so that the nominee is not equating public protest and legitimate civil society concerns as noise. That's what the deputy leader wants him to avert his mind to.
Okay,
but whilst at it there, is there an action for judgment debt? Is it the case that government owes West Blue for non-payment of its services? Thank you, Chair.
Respectfully, Honorable Leader, I think it is appropriate that I put it in the right context. So I'm saying that after the first month of deployment in July, there was an increase of 23% over the previous year, 2019. This is against the background that we were in the heart of the COVID experience, which obviously then meant that there was a lot of trade disruption. In the second month, in August, there was a 31% increase. In September, 34%. In October, 34%. In November, 25%. In December, 19%. So, Mr. Chairman, how is it that a system that had been described in very negative terms could, upon deployment, immediately increase our revenue mobilization to start? It's never happened in this country before.
Minister, it's not about increases in volumes of trade and volumes of what was imported.
No, it's
a function of CIF, many of it. I'm saying that 2019, for you to take note, there was no COVID in 2019. So you probably will be referring to 2020 figures. But I get your percentages, 23, 31, 34%. But I'm saying that couldn't it be a function of volumes?
Respectfully, Minority Leader, COVID was in 2020. And I'm suggesting to you that with the decrease in the volume of trade, you could not expect logically that you would have increased volumes and by extension increased value. This is, I think, logic. So the 2019 figures I'm referring to is a basis for comparing the deployment of the system in 2020 as against 2019, where you had the system you are referring to, GCNet, West Blue, and all these other. I think it's material information. Now, if you add the differences in accumulation or escalation of revenue mobilization, you are talking about just within a period of just 6 months, that's from July to December, we earned more than 1.6 billion Ghana cedis. How does a system that does not work in 5 or 6 months generate additional 1.6 billion in revenue? Something that has not happened before in our country. So I think that this is a material fact. But I can now go on.
Chair, with your leave, Honorable Nominee. So from what you just saying, the figures you just given out, your suggestion is that, but for COVID, the figures would have even gone higher.
Exactly so. Mr. Chairman, I'll now proceed to respond to the issue of potential judgment debt. And again, it's a serious matter that he has raised. And I need to give you the historical background. And that's the only way you can explain whether there's the potential for judgment debt or not. Now, the original agreement between the government of Ghana and GCNet was signed on the 2nd of October 2000. But this agreement did not become effective until around 2003. Now, the agreement provided for a 10-year period of service provision. So that was supposed to take us from 2003 to 2013. Now, before the expiration of the agreement in 2013, there was a first supplemental agreement which was signed on the 26th of August 2013, giving an extension of 5 years to the service provider, the GCNet. So, ostensibly, this supplemental agreement was supposed to end in 2018. Strangely enough, in October 2016, 2 months before the end of the term of office of the previous government, 2 clear years before the expiration of this agreement, first supplemental agreement, because it was supposed to end in 2018. There was a second supplemental agreement signed on the 28th of October 2016, extending an unexpired term of an agreement for a further 5 years to end in 2023. Obviously, this calls for some kind of inquiry. An agreement that has 2 years unexpired term is now extended for a further 5 years from the time that it is supposed to end in future to 2023. So On assumption of...
But you can keep it there. I should understand that if you have your copy of that agreement with you, which was signed in August, I should recall that I facilitated the first part of it, but in the extension, I said 10 years, but after 5 years, subject to an assessment. You don't find that in that agreement? It was there.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, in what you are holding, we said that if you pursued it for those number of years, renewal was only subject to an assessment, and I recall bringing in some experts from Belgium to have examined the whole GC net trade facilitation regime. But it's intriguing, the details that you have shared. But I'm saying that go more into the agreement that you signed. There was a condition that it should be subjected to an assessment for an extension. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Member. That is not in dispute. But I am submitting that after the assessment has been made and you make a decision that you would extend it, it is strange that 2 years on an unexpired term of an agreement, you extend it for a further 5 years. So the issue that you are advancing is not in contention about the fact that an assessment had to be made. And the assessment was made. So Mr. Chair, I think that's not the issue.
Nominee, so was the extension done before the assessment? The extension, was it done before the assessment?
I would suppose that it was done after the assessment.
Chairman, I'm just putting it on the record. If you read the 2013 agreement, it was extended for 10 years. So 2013 for 10 years would have been 2023. But there was a provision in the agreement which said that because technology changes very fast, after 5 years into the agreement, you renew subject to an assessment. I just wanted that to be part of the record. And if you doubt it, you can refer to the agreement that you are holding, that there was dedicated provision for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just also to put it on record, that there's no dispute about the requirement for assessment. I was just saying that if you have an unexpired term of 2 years on an agreement and you give an extension of 2 years after the term of expiration, which is in the future, it's an interesting case in law. That's all that I'm saying. But let's escalate the matter. So here we are. We come into office in 2017. Now we realize that the supplemental agreement that was signed, both the first and the second, to all intents and purposes ought to be construed as international agreements, because SGS, which is the majority shareholder of GCNet, it's a foreign company and has majority shares in the GCNet. And so there was a requirement in law for that supplemental agreement, both the first and the second, to have been submitted to Parliament, and that was not done. Secondly, Article 11.3 of the original agreement signed in 2000 that I referred to granted government the right to early termination, which is a standard clause in many.
Was the 2000 agreement submitted to Parliament for approval?
No, because at that time, that provision in law was...
No, I just want to know, was the 2000 agreement brought to Parliament? Thank you.
There was no requirement, yes. So, based on these two factors, the agreement, the two supplemental agreements themselves are void in law. And so, under normal circumstances, we ought not even to have operationalized the agreement. But basically that was history. But for us to proceed then on the basis, having found out the shortcoming, and to continue with that in itself will be further violating the law. And as I said also, the provisions of the original agreement gives the right of government to early termination upon the payment of appropriate compensation, as every agreement provides. So if GCNet or West Blue, as the honorable member was referring to, decides to go to court, will be ably represented there, and will look at the merits of the case.
Yes, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to my boss, the honorable nominee. You gave me my first political appointment as your PA, and I will eternally be grateful for this opportunity. You have done a lot as the Minister for Trade, one district, one factory, implementation of AfCFTA, among many things. I, however, have an instruction from the Ejuso Traditional Council to bring a matter to your kind notice. And it's to do with the encroachment of free zones enclave in the Ejuso area. And I wish to demonstrate that on the, please, the second one. The second one, before this one. Good. So, sir, this is 1,090 acres of land that was given to free zones sometime in 2002. Unfortunately, 18 years on, not much has been done there, and people have been building. So all the dotted areas represent, no, go back please. All these areas represent different structures that people have put on there. The colors represent different levels of construction, from completion to lintel to foundation. Now, when we worked, it's about 1/3 of the total area, and I've been asked to bring to your notice and seek your comment on the matter. Respectfully, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. I fully understand the position that the honorable member finds himself, being the newly elected member of parliament for that particular constituency which falls in that traditional area, that you will bring this concern of the people of the traditional area to our notice, particularly to the notice of this honorable house. Mr. Chairman, the problem of encroachment is a major one, not only for the free zones land, but as we know, all over Ghana. Now, our view is that there are a number of options to deal with encroachment. First, you can erect physical structures around the particular property to limit the potential for encroachment. Now, we are talking about an acreage of over 1,000 acres. So although that is a possibility, the expense involved is significant. And so that has been a major concern to the Ghana Free Zones Authority, limiting the use of that option. The second option is to admit that the encroachment has already taken place and to then regularize the actions of the encroachers and then cede the encroached acreage to the encroachers upon payment of compensation, appropriate compensation to those who were already on the land. We've looked at that option. We have not totally discounted that, but we've also not taken a firm decision on that matter because this is public land, and for whatever reason, it is strange that for the project that was to be executed for that traditional area, that you have residents within that area who would then do such a thing as encroaching on those lands. But as I said, it's already happened, and we are investigating that. When the Free Zones Authority realized the extent of the encroachment, they engaged the services of a surveyor to assess the extent of the encroached area, so that an appropriate decision will be taken. Now, I'm just basically to end on this note that we feel that the way forward is to accelerate the development that is intended on the proposed site, and that automatically then also serves as another option of warding away encroachers. And we are continuously engaging with the chiefs and people of Jeso to sensitize them on the need for the traditional rulers and then the people of Jeso themselves to protect that property. So basically, it's not being left in abeyance. It's a matter that is being seriously addressed. So, Honorable Member, I think you can convey this to the traditional rulers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Honorable Minister, I want to follow up on this one. I've been actively involved in it from the beginning, when I was at DVLA, became a member of Parliament, Committee on Roads and Transport. We visited it. Let's be clear. Does the Ministry of Trade wish to do anything on that site? It's been 19 years. There's a conflict of the personal needs versus the public need. Does the Ministry of Trade or Free Zones Board wish to do anything on the land? And when are they going to do it?
Honorable Chair, I agree with you with the sentiments that you have on this matter. But I think you would appreciate that this matter is similar to other cases around the country where pieces of land have been acquired by government, in some cases through compulsory acquisition, but they have not been developed for that purpose. Multiple cases. The problem has always been a question of resources, because all over the world we know that industrial enclaves or industrial zones or industrial parks are a major instrument for industrialization. So it is perfectly in order and it is appropriate for government to acquire or develop land banks. We talk about this all the time, to develop land banks that can now then become available to potential investors. But the point is that once you acquire the piece of land, you pay compensation, and it's a lot of money. And now you have to develop the land. And so it has purely been a question of resources. But that has informed the new policy that I have adopted on assumption of office in the first term of the MPP government, that it is not sustainable for government to continue through the free zones to be acquiring land banks when they do not have the capacity to mobilize resources to develop these lands, as the current matter before us speaks to. And so our position now is that let's provide incentives for private sector developers to engage in the exercise of developing these land banks, and then government supports them to ensure that that they survive. So this is currently the policy, but this is an old acquisition.
Chairman, if the nominee, back to this, if you have the constitution with you, Article 25 and 6, let it guide you with what Chairman said. You acquired it for a certain purpose. Is it being used for that purpose? If it is not being used, let it revert back to the original owners. That's what the Constitution provides for. And what you've lost out already, count it as lost. Put what is remaining into use. And my view is that industrial park, you can start developing it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For want of time, I didn't want to veer into other areas that we are working on. But again, when I talk about our industrial transformation agenda, it's not just one D1F, and so fortunate people just only refer to one D1F. But another key pillar of this transformation agenda is to develop industrial parks around the country. We call it the one region, one park. And as I said, this is in collaboration with the private sector. So as I speak now, this land in question that the minority leader is referring to has now been incorporated into a new project which is called the Greater Kumasi Industrial City and Economic Zone, which is a 4,500-acre initiative to be developed by private sector and government, and which will now incorporate the land under question. And this is going to be the next major industrial enclave after Tema. Because let's understand that the Ashanti region, and for that matter, that center where it's being developed this as an industrial, connects 6 or 7 regions in Ghana. Greater Accra, Ashanti region, Western North, part of Central region, part of Eastern region. Is also the transit corridor to the Sahelian countries. So we cannot be concentrating our industrial agenda only in Accra and Tema. So this major initiative will now incorporate this site under question. So it's very much along the lines that the minority leader is referring to. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, let me convey the assurances of the Ejoso Traditional Council that we are firmly behind you on this project and we want to see the project going on. But the opportunity calls for the delayed takeoff of these projects. And I'm happy that you have referred to the 4,500 acres in the Greater Kumasi area for the industrial city, which also happens to be in the Ejoso constituency. The delayed takeoff has resulted in the denial of legal rights of the local people to even farm on these lands. How soon are we likely to see companies setting up at the free zones enclave to provide jobs and industrial opportunities for the communities?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I do not want to give a specific answer in terms of time, but I'm sure the Honourable Member of Parliament has just taken office. If he consults with the traditional leaders, and then also we would be glad and pleased to work with him so that we can get some certainty in terms of timelines. Because as I've explained, this is not about government. This is about government facilitating and providing incentives to the private sector to undertake this project. So as I speak now, engineering designs have been conducted. All the site plans and the environmental assessment is being done. So a lot of work is being done. This is going to be one of the biggest projects to be implemented in terms of industrial activity in our country. So obviously it takes time. And we are also working on the mobilization of resources to pay for compensation. So it's work in progress.
Finally.
And it's been part of the budget statement, I think, in the last year. Thank you.
Finally, the industrial, and I want to assure my boss that I'm ever ready to partner with him to carry out this program. Industrial city projects and economic zones come with provision of certain amenities like water, extension of electricity, and good roads, especially within the enclave. So far, all the allocations that we have there, the 1,090, there's a second diagram which talks about the greater Kumasi area. This is almost about the 4,500 acres you spoke about. And then also the 400 acres for Buankra Inland Port. They do not have the social amenities I referred to, like water, good roads, and electricity, which of course will serve as incentive for potential investors into those areas. Please, can we have your assurance that we are going to have an extension of the supply of these amenities onto these allocations? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. You have the assurance, Honorable Member, and I think this is basic project development. You cannot talk about such a big project without providing off-site infrastructure. So the engineering studies that I'm talking about has actually been in respect the off-site infrastructure. The off-site infrastructure includes extending water, electricity, telecommunication services. All those things are part of the off-site infrastructure. And the last mile infrastructure will then be undertaken by the anchor tenants who come into the industrial city. And so I think it goes without saying that a big project like this has to have all the amenities for it to succeed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Nilante.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairman. Honorable Nominee, first let me ask you, what is your position on green industry and the advantages involved in this, and what is Ghana's policy on the green industry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to be sure that I heard the Honorable Member right. Is it green industry? Yes, thank you. Mr. Chairman, as we know, globally, the world is going green, and we are following that developmental trajectory and that development path. And we are working in collaboration with other sector ministries to ensure that we also go green in terms of our industrialization plan and efforts. But to a large extent, because we are driving a policy and program that is supporting the private sector, to intervene in these areas, and not government itself making the investments. It also, to a large extent, depends on what we are discussing with our private sector collaborators. But as part of the environmental assessment that is done, that is a major part of what the industrial transformation plan calls for. And it's in all areas, including green energy and other aspects of the green, I would say, green revolution. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, there's a huge money out there in that industry, so I will plead that Honorable Nominee and I sat in a meeting at the AU on this particular issue, and I'm surprised up to now we have not really taken steps to see how we can get something out of this. But my second, which is also on a decision that has been taken, there has been advocacy for the setting up of a common West African shipping line to facilitate trade on the basis of the aviation industry, ASCA, and financial industry, EcoBank, and the rest. What is your take on this, and how far have the West African countries and the trade ministers taken this particular decision, and what is Ghana's take on it?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'm happy you've raised, the Honourable Member has raised this particular point, because part of the challenge that we've had with ECOWAS trade is moving goods across our borders, both in terms of ease of movement and then also freight costs. And we all know that shipping is probably the best way forward if you want to move goods in significant volumes. And so the challenge of developing shipping interconnectivity between our West African countries has always been on the drawing board. And as trade ministers, we've been working kindly with a private sector group in which the chambers of commerce are very actively involved to be able to develop this shipping, ECOWAS shipping network. My understanding is that the major challenge has been a question of resources, but it's on the drawing board. And now that we are talking about going beyond ECOWAS to the rest of Africa, it becomes even more critical, because according to the protocols underpinning AfCFTA, you can use raw materials from your sub-region, because the regional economic communities are still existing within the belly of the AfCFTA. So it is important and appropriate for us to now ensure that this regional shipping network becomes a reality. It is not going to be just the governments of West Africa, but then I think more importantly, the private sector with the support from the development finance institutions like African Development Bank and then the ECOWAS Bank for Development. But I can assure you that it's a matter that is still under very serious consideration. I'm sure when you were at the ministry, you were also apprised of this. Yes. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, now to something that touches my heart, because I'm the member of Parliament for Dodo. Retail trade and the constant friction between Guta and foreigners in our retail trade sector. And one of the most serious ones we've seen recently is a tendency for foreigners to take advantage of our GIPC law, get married to Ghanaians in order to own shops within the retail market space to avoid the, let me say, the scrutiny of GUTA and other Ghanaian institutions that monitor these things. What are we going to do to ensure that we respect the protocols that demand that when it comes to retail trade is a preserve of nationals and indigents?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, the issue of foreigners in domestic retail trade is obviously a very vexed one, and it's been going on for decades. What the ministry has done is to take a firm position on the matter, that according to the laws of our country, there are certain enterprises or activities that are currently reserved for Ghanaians, and it's clearly specified under the GIPC Act. Now, the lack of enforcement of the provisions of the GIPC Act is what has led to this tension that continues to exist between foreign traders and then, let's say, GUTA and other traders in Ghana. Now, beyond the provisions of the GIPC Act, there are also several provisions in different enactments that have to be respected, whether you're a Ghanaian or a foreigner and you want to engage in retail trade. The challenge that we've had is that even if the provision in the GIPC Act was waived, I'm saying even if it was waived for a variety of reasons, there's still a requirement for foreigners engaged in retail trade to abide by the laws of Ghana. And so what has occurred is the abuse of these laws and regulations. I mean, whether it's immigration laws, whether laws relating to revenue, GRA regulations, or even regulations in respect of business operating licenses that is under the authority of our metropolitan and district assemblies. We cannot have a situation in a country where Ghanaians are compelled by these regulatory authorities to abide by these laws, and then we turn around, to ignore when these same rules are being violated by foreigners. And I think it is important for us also to make note of the fact that it is not about targeting specific nationals, particularly in West Africa. We are talking about foreigners in retail trade. And so, because of the tension that has arisen over the years, we have had very serious consultations between our various countries, and then even at the level of ECOWAS. And we've agreed that foreigners who want to engage in retail trade in Ghana must go by the laws of our country. I know that issues have been raised in respect of conflict between provisions in the ECOWAS protocol and then our domestic law. But the law is clear on this. And as I indicated, even if that requirement of the GIPC was waived, the other regulations have to be respected. What I can say in conclusion, though, is that in order to ensure that we maintain our long-standing bonds of friendship and economic engagement particularly with our neighbors in West Africa, that we've taken a position that in all cases where there are violations of these provisions, that we must make sure that we engage and consult with each other rather than take arbitrary actions. So that has been the position.
Chairman, I've finished, but let me also inform the honorable nominee that in looking at that angle, I think he must engage more, because now the Chinese have virtually taken over the market.
After we approve him, then we can have a private chat with him. Yes, leader, I thought you...
Chairman, thank you. Honorable Minister, let me commend you. Join earlier speakers. Relative question asked by the Honorable Ndila Van der Poel. And I recognize that you've taken the trouble to run us through the existence of the law and all that. Recent times, we've experienced a situation where there was near, or even exchanges, clashes between our nationals and other foreign nationals. Then, all of a sudden, it's been quiet. I think it's been on and off. But I believe this didn't just happen. Are you able to apprise this committee some concrete measures, however temporary they are, that this government, led by your good self, has been able to undertake to restore the seeming quietness?
Thank you, Mr. We, as I indicated, have in particular made an effort to consult with our friends, particularly in Nigeria, in Togo and Benin, about finding ways of addressing these issues that are under reference. We also had a delegation from the Parliament of Nigeria that visited, and we had consultations and engagement with them. So the point that I would like to stress is that the consultations and the engagement that have been led by the ministry under the leadership of our president is what has made it possible for us not to sweep the matter under the carpet, but to bring the tension down. And that is how come you see that the tension is not as intense as they were. Yeah.
Yes, I know why.
The Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement and the implications opening up our market. Have we taken advantage of the institutions, policies, and systems to build local industries that can produce competitively, to be able to take advantage of this continental free trade arrangement that we are putting in place, particularly Exim Bank that we established, Ghana Exim Bank. How have we, over the 4 years during which you were Minister for Trade and Industry, used the resources there to support efficient local industries to be able to produce for export? Do you monitor industries to be able to assess those that are doing well, that the state should provide support to become big producers for export so that they can compete with the imports that are creating problems for us in our markets?
Thank you, Chair. Honourable Member, I had earlier on made reference to a variety of industrial activities and interventions that the government has been engaged in, all designed to promote and support our local businesses. First, to be able to import, substitute, or produce for the local market, but more importantly, also to be able to export. So I've gone through this earlier on extensively, whether it's under the One District, One Factory program, or whether it is support at the district level through our business resource centers. But beyond this general program of industrialization, with the coming into force of AfTA, African Continental Free Trade Area, we've established a national office that is currently implementing a national program of action specifically targeting companies that can produce competitively for the export market, particularly in Africa, but also for Europe and the United States, because we have duty-free and quota-free access to these markets also. Now, these program interventions are supposed to cover a variety of areas. One is enhancing productive capacity. Second is ensuring that there's access to affordable credit, that's working with the financial institutions and banks. The other is also identifying specific market information about market opportunities in different countries. The other relates to ensuring that we provide technical assistance for quality and standards. We are also supporting them in terms of human resource capacity building. Going into exports is difficult, and we are doing that also to enhance their capacity to export. I made reference earlier on, I'm not sure if you were here, that we have a program that is targeting companies that are already exporting to Africa. So these are low-hanging fruits. So we do a needs assessment of these companies so that we can have a targeted program that helps them to enhance their current levels of production. But there are others that are not exporting to Africa, but exporting to other parts of the world. So we are guiding them also now to be able to also identify opportunities for the African market. So a lot is going on, and sometimes it's difficult to have the opportunity to talk about everything.
Nominee doesn't know Honorable Muntaka is here. When you give an elaborate answer, he takes a note and to come in cross-examination. So he says today is Friday, he doesn't want to do his usual thing. So if you give very short answers, we'll have few questions for you. Yeah. He says if you give an elaborate answer, he will take notes.
Honorable, I thought you were going to ask a question. Yes, Honorable.
Yeah, Honorable Nominee and former Minister for Trade and Industry. Now, the issue with exports and imports and local production to substitute imports really is underlined by price. At what price are importers, the goods that are being imported, at what price is it being produced in the country of export, okay? And then at what price is the same good being produced here? Then you add tax and etc. to get whether or not the products will be competitive here. Now, do you have a mechanism for taking items and analyzing critically the inputs and trying to deal with the inefficiencies in the price buildup for the production of those items. Let's take, for instance, rice. We're importing, close to 1 million or more metric tons of rice every year. And then we're talking about producing rice locally. But if you compare the unit cost of production in Thailand, you compare the unit cost of production in Ghana, unless you deal with the inefficiencies in the price buildup in terms of the unit cost of production, you can never be competitive. So somebody will still produce in Thailand, ship it, come here, still handle logistical costs, and still be able to outcompete the local producer of rice here, because he has a price buildup that is just inefficient by imposed fertilizer pricing, by imposed chemical pricing, by all sort of impositions. That just produces an inefficient production cost. As a ministry, do you have a strategy for a more detailed work on production cost? Because I've been at the ministry before as a deputy minister. All the things that you are saying today, we said it at that time, and etc. But the key thing is to zero in on specific items you are producing and the efficiency of what you are doing, and ultimately the price of the item. How are you able to deal with that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, we have a very comprehensive program of support to our enterprises that we support. And the services are not provided by staff of the ministry. We engage technical experts in many cases that would interrogate the areas that we've identified, that would examine areas that lead to cost buildup and operational inefficiency. So our team of experts and consultants are doing exactly what you're saying. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Honorable Young.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Minister, congratulations. Let's move into the area of the automotive industry. Can I proceed, please?
Yeah.
Very well. Late last year, you introduced to this economy an automotive industry policy. And subsequent to that, there were some ensuing controversies between government and car, vehicle importers, garage owners, and I have a lot of them in my constituency, the Europas of the world. We've seen that a lot of huge companies in the automotive industry have decided to set up here as a result of the policy you ushered into being: Peugeot, Nissan, VW, etc. What is the status of this laudable program in the face of these challenges from our local industry players in that sector? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, the implementation of the automobile development policy has undoubtedly yielded very positive results, and I think I do not need to speak to that. But it is clear that there's been some misunderstanding between different stakeholders about the impact and the effect of this policy on their businesses. First is in respect of what has been described in the policy and the Customs Amendment Law as salvage vehicles. Reference has also been made to the issue of overage, importation of overage vehicles. Regrettably, there was a lot of controversy that had been generated over this. But I'd like to assure this House that there is really no need for that tension to arise. for a number of reasons. Because if you look at the provisions of the Customs Amendment Act, which refers to salvage vehicle, unfortunately, the law did not specify what is described as physical damage or wreckage. I don't need to get into the details of the law. But we explained to the stakeholders that there will be the need for regulations to be put in place that will further define the implementation arrangements of what is in the law. And I think that to a large extent, the industry players have now come to appreciate and understand that there's really no threat to the businesses that they are undertaking, and that in actual fact they stand to benefit from the development of the auto industry in Ghana in a variety of ways. So whether it's the issue of salvage vehicles or the issue of overage cars, we've come to a common understanding with the industry players that in some cases there's a specific requirement that it is only when the Minister of Trade advises the Minister of Finance that certain provisions of the law would kick in. And so it still lies in the bosom of the ministry, and we continuously engage with the industry players to ensure that the implementation of the provisions of this law does not negatively affect their business.
I'm happy the Georgia and Co, the garage owners in my constituency will be happy. Mr. Minister, last year you also saw into being the Enterprise Ghana Agency Act 2020. The economy is largely informal, and it's made up of a lot of micro, small, and medium enterprises, NBSSI, the Maslow's of the world. How does this link with your 10-point industrial transformation plan for this country, with the BRCs and under the Rural Enterprise Program? Thank you. That's my last question, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, one of the 10 pillars of our industrial transformation agenda is the development of micro, small, and medium enterprises. And so, under this component, we've introduced a number of interventions. One is the transformation of MBSSI to strengthen their organizational and management capacity, and also to resource them to be able now to ensure that they are able to efficiently perform their role as an apex body for MSMEs. So part of it was developing the MSME policy to support the transformation of MBSSI. Secondly, as you alluded to, now we've expanded the scope of MBSSI and their reach into the districts with the establishment of the business resource centers, which are under the supervision and oversight of MBSSI. And so, to a large extent, the MBSSI is going to become a reformed organization so that they can deepen their support to MSMEs. As you rightly indicated, over 90% of our enterprises belong to that category, and we needed a transformed organization to be able to support these enterprises.
Samuel Kujat.
Most grateful, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, let me congratulate the nominee and indicate that though I do not know how long he'll stay at the ministry before he resigns to run for president, I certainly wish him well. The first question is to seek the nominees' reflections on the exciting times in international trade following the emergence of the first African and first female Director General of the World Trade Organization, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. Many trade followers in Ghana had thought that if there would be a first African Director General, it would be the Venerable John Allan Kwejo Kyeremanteng. But Nigerians are good cousins, and so it is well in order, and we are all excited about this development. And we congratulate Dr. Okonjo-Iweala. But the question is, this is happening at a time that we are at the forefront of establishing the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. How do you think that Africa, and for that matter Ghana, which is hosting the AfCFTA Secretariat, can leverage this exciting development at the WTO? The new Director General has said that she would pursue deep reforms. She would address matters to do with protectionism, subsidies, and all the bilateral trade wars that are going on that leaves underdeveloped countries as the victims of all of these power play in rich economies. How do you think that Ghana can leverage this development, the first African Director General, with our AfCFTA agenda to expand the frontiers of fair trade for the benefit of our economies and to yield to job creation as we seek a rebound from the effect of COVID-19?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, as the Honourable Member has very aptly described the WTO, the main objective of the WTO is to expand the frontiers of free trade. And to a large extent, that's the same objective of the African Continental Free Trade Area, to expand the frontiers of free trade in Africa by liberalizing tariffs and then also ensuring the free flow of goods and services between our African countries. So to a large extent, we are working towards the same objective. And in that regard, having an African as the Director General of the WTO provides an opportunity for us in Africa, whilst we embark on this major initiative of liberalizing trade between ourselves, how we use our collaboration between ourselves as a launching pad to enhance our participation in the global market, which is superintended by the WTO. So basically, if we can deepen our trade under AfCFTA amongst ourselves, that would then become a launching pad for us to increase our presence in global trade. And I think that once you have a fellow African, I mean, it can only be to advantage. So we hope we can fully use that opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
As by way of quick follow-up, has...
Honourable members, today we will want to close early, so do your second one, please. I announced at the beginning, and we will be smart today, so please, your second question.
My second question, Mr. Chairman, will relate to a rather tragic development that occurred when the Honorable Nominee was Minister. Tragic for local business and local initiative, local industries. On the 16th of February, a Sunday, 16th of February 2020, at midnight, the Ghana Trade Fair Company Limited, which is one of the institutions you supervise, it's under your ministry, carried out a demolition of some 28 companies at the trade fair. The managers of these companies indicate that they were taken by surprise, they were not notified. National security operatives are said to have carried out the demolition. I have the pictures of the demolition here. You see machinery, valuable equipment, and office accessories, all destroyed in the demolition. Can you tell us the circumstances of this demolition? Did you authorize it as sector minister? And don't you think that that is a blight on your reputation as champion of Ghanaian industries?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. I think it's unfortunate that we have people who used to be tenants on the property of the Ghana Trade Fair Authority who have been affected by this redevelopment exercise. But as you are aware, the Trade Fair Authority is a private company, although government has had a full shareholding in the company. It has a board. The board took a decision that for the redevelopment exercise to go on smoothly, it required the evacuation of tenants from the site. And the relevant notices, as far as I'm reliably informed, had been given to the tenants over a 3-year period. And like with any major development project, you have a critical path that you follow in terms of project execution. And so the continued stay of the tenants was inhibiting progress in the development of the site. And basically the board took a decision that once notices had been given over an extended period of time, that they'll go ahead with the demolition exercise. We intervened at a point to see whether there was some arrangement that could be made to extend the time for them to be able to find alternative locations. And in actual fact, I am aware that the tenants were given some extension in terms of time. But as I said, with project development, it comes to a point where the execution requires you to take certain actions. So that's what I can say about this. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to my third question, just to indicate that this sudden announcement of no follow-ups is constraining. The Honorable John Kuma had follow-ups. I don't know why I cannot have follow-ups. I will take up this matter when we go into concrete. Mr. Chairman,
you know, I have been very liberal.
No, but I don't think on this instance you are being fair to me.
Do early. Can you do your third one?
I will place on record that you have not been fair to me, because these are important issues.
Keep that record to yourself.
What did you say? My third question, Honorable Nominee, will be from the 7th November 2018 official report of Parliament. The last time this House discussed the 1D, 1F flagship initiative. At column 787 and 788, when you brief this House on the status of the 1D, 1F program, you provided the regional breakdown of 1D, 1F interventions across the various regions. Parliament did raise concern about the unfair distribution. If I would have to make reference to the table you provided, the Upper East region did not have a single 1D, 1F project, zero. Upper West had only one. Western region had only one. Volta region had only one. We did request that you consider a fair distribution of this 1D, 1F intervention. My question is, did you respectfully carry out this observation and concern that Parliament expressed? And can you give us the current breakdown of the 1D, 1F initiatives across the 16 regions of Ghana?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, in an earlier question posed by the minority leader, I had indicated that unfortunately I do not have the regional breakdown, but I can assure you that the position is better now than the time that I made this representation to this House. Thank you.
Yeah. Very well. There.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Honorable Nominee. My question has to do with the automobile industry. And we get the sense that Ghana is positioning itself as the automobile assembly hub for West Africa. Would you be able to tell us the level of local content in terms of involving Ghanaians in this industry to enable transferability of skills, which might eventually lead to Ghanaian ownership of some of these companies? Is there a plan towards ensuring that Ghanaians benefit from this industry? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Member, there are different ways that Ghanaians will be benefiting from this industry. The first and obvious one is through employment and skills development, because the majority of the people that will be employed will be Ghanaians, not just at the lower level, but also at the supervisory and managerial levels. Secondly, there's a significant opportunity for Ghanaians to also become dealers. Although initially the trend is for existing dealers who may not necessarily be Ghanaians, who are now the local partners of the, let's say, big automobile companies. We, as part of our policy, have insisted that we need to decentralize the dealership of these locally produced vehicles, particularly as you move out of Accra, Kumasi, and the big centers. So I think there's general agreement, and the current dealers who are working with the big companies themselves are very pleased about this, because they cannot overextend themselves to every part of the country. So if my very good friend Honorable Ayariga wants to take up the dealership for Volkswagen in the whole of the northern regions, obviously that becomes an opportunity, an economic opportunity. So that's another area that they will benefit. Another area that they will benefit it's also in terms of component manufacturing. Because in the long run, when you assemble cars, you do not optimize your benefits until you start producing the component parts. And so we know that we have the capacity in this country with the support of new technology, let's say, to develop Swami into a major component manufacturing hub. And we've had discussions with the global companies that are already showing up in this country. And they are very excited because the closer you are to your components for the assembly, the cheaper and more efficient it is for you. So they are very interested in supporting local content, not just in terms of employment, but in terms of component assembly. Thank you.
Thank you. My second question is back to one district, one factory. You just described it as a revolution, and we think here the initiative was looking at restructuring the Ghanaian economy to make it more local-based. With hindsight, will you say that in an effort to cover the entire districts in this country within 4 years was a little bit overly ambitious? And whether you didn't consider staggering the projects so that you scale them up as we went along? Or maybe that consideration, political considerations, overwhelm some of these other considerations. With hindsight, what will your thoughts be on the manner in which the one district, one factory was implemented? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mr. Chairman. Honorable Member, I can understand why, from a conceptual point of view, this might have sounded a bit ambitious, that you would want to have a factory in every district. But I think the philosophy underpinning this was not for government to be establishing these enterprises. This is designed to facilitate support to the private sector to establish these factories. So far, I think there's been overwhelming interest and support for this. So, in a sense, I do not think that, on hindsight, that we were being impractical or over-ambitious. However, I would also agree with you that there are certain parts of the country where we may not necessarily be able to attract private investors in establishing 1D, 1F companies. So in those districts, government has made it a policy that government will intervene directly and incubate some of these enterprises, and then later on offload that to the private sector if it becomes necessary. But I think the principle is that every district in Ghana deserves to have development. And all these districts have natural resources that can be developed. We need employment around the country. So it may be an ambitious target, but if you see what we've done so far, I think it is realizable. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Very well. Gisela. She's not ready. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honorable nominee, I'd like to ask you about the ECOWAS single currency program, which has been with us for